Hi, and welcome to Uncorked, Wine, Business, and Life with Bill Green. I'm Jerrold Colton, co-host, and we have an amazing guest here today. Bill, from the time we talked about doing this podcast, this was one of the first ones you suggested. You couldn't wait till he got here, and here he is.
Yeah, he was at the very top of the list. So Ira Lubert is one of my newer friends, about 12 or 13 years, and Ira is known as one of the most successful and iconic investors, not only in Philadelphia, but in the United States. And I got introduced, we'd shaken hands maybe years ago, but a formal meeting. And I got to tell you, I don't get nervous very often, but when this meeting was set up by Sid or Richard Vague or whatever, and you have a pretty palatial office overlooking Philadelphia, I was pretty intimidated. And within 5 seconds, you softened the beaches, and it was like, wow, I'm like with Uncle Ira. And, one of the things that came out of that first meeting was he said, wow, you're an operator, so let's kind of make a deal. Let's do some stuff together. But Ira, you have to teach me how to be a good investor. And I don't want to know what the scorecard is on that. But thank you so much for being on Uncorked. It's just been an amazing bunch of years working together.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate coming.
It's certainly our pleasure. And he already listed a couple of names you have in common, but there's so many. And it's hard to know exactly where to start the Ira Lubert story, but I think a good place is heading into Penn State. So that's the late 60s, a very, very different time. We're, over 50 years ago. 50.
So I don't tell this story often. It was 1968. I graduated from Newton, New Jersey High School. I was very fortunate. I won a New Jersey State Wrestling Championship my senior year, 1968.
And I just want to stop you there. People who don't appreciate how incredible accomplishment that is. One person in each weight class, and the pressure all the way up to win the districts and the regions and to win state had to be an incredible accomplishment for a high school kid.
Yeah, it really was. And when you layer on top of that, I played basketball at 260 pounds and 6 foot tall. I could jump about 4 inches off the ground. But my sophomore year of high school, they had terminated the high school wrestling coach and football coach. And 2 recent graduates from the University of Maryland, Gary Wykander and Dick Geedy, one was hired as the head football coach, one was hired as the head football coach, and then they were both the head football coach was the assistant wrestling coach, and the head wrestling coach was the assistant football coach. So when I show up for my weigh-in and my physical for my football, my sophomore year, they told me I couldn't play basketball, that I had to wrestle. Now, if you said that today, probably it'd be a lawsuit. But back then, so I went to the athletic director, Art Disk. It's funny how you remember these names after 70 years, 60 years. And he just said, you ought to wrestle. Like he didn't.
What did you weigh?
I weighed 260 pounds.
It's a big basketball player.
It was smart. And they taught me to wrestle. So I only had wrestling my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and won the states my senior year.
What an accomplishment.
So
most of those kids are wrestling their entire youth.
Ever since, grammar school.
So great. And you were a team sport player, very different being an individual sport.
That's right.
Right.
So I'd made that transition, and then I was fortunate to get a full scholarship to Penn State. But again, I was rejected twice to Penn State before they finally accepted me. I didn't have the greatest grades. I wasn't that serious about school. But I had met from my hometown. I worked on Rich Lorenzo's farm, his parents' farm. They bulked me up. And he was a wrestler at Penn State. So he taught me. And just ironically, when I graduated from high school, he graduated from college, and he became the assistant wrestling coach. And they made kind of an exception, and I had to go for the summer term. And then later I was able to negotiate out of that to the fall term. But, and to this day, Rich Lorenzo is my best friend, and has always been my best friend. And he's 79 years old today, and we see each other all the time. And that's how it started.
Now, I know a big part of your story is Penn State.
Yeah.
Did you fall instantly in love with State College?
Yeah, I think it's the greatest place on earth. Always have, always probably will. I have a home up there. I'm presently building the last casino that will ever get built in Pennsylvania in State College. It's under construction. So I really love it up there. I think it's a great environment for people to be exposed to.
But this is, this is just part of the story, because not only is Ira an amazing investor, he also donates his time and his money to philanthropy. And the Penn State bucket is philanthropy. You were chairman of Penn State during a really rough period. We won't get into that. Oh, why not? No. And like for years, you led that school, and you had a lot, managing a few hundred other investments and putting your time in says a lot about the person. So talk about, that stint there for a bunch of years.
So I've 17 years on the Penn State board. Very proud of that. I've given my time and my treasure to Penn State. Look, when I was a wrestler at Penn State, I got beat out by one of my other best friends to this day, Dr. Dave Joyner. We were both heavyweights. He finished second in the Nationals one year. He played football. He was an All-American.
Under Paterno.
And then he'd come out for wrestling after football, and the first 2 or 3 times I would beat him by 1 point. And after that, he'd get in better shape. And when we try out for the Nationals, every year he beat me by 1 point. So, in other schools, they only had 3 scholarships per year for wrestlers. That's all, 3. I got 1 my freshman year. And when I didn't make the team my sophomore year, I thought they were going to take my scholarship. They never did. And I never forgot that. Penn State was very loyal to me. And I made a promise I'd be very loyal to them. And I believe I fulfilled the promise. So I 17 years on their board, lived through the Sandusky scenario. They asked me to be the chair of the board during that rough time. Before that, I head up the legal committee, and I had to help negotiate 27 of the 36 child molestation cases. They wanted the businessman to sit with the lawyers. I went to my 2 partners at my private equity and real estate funds and asked them for their permission to, pretty much took a year off from my funds and became the chairman. And I won't get into all the things that we went through, but it was a pretty dark time for that year. I do believe Penn State came out much stronger, much better, and the franchise is in great position today, but there were some dark days.
It's frankly unbelievable how quickly they did come out of it after you, and I'm sure your leadership was huge. Yeah. I want to get to the start of your business career and actually your entrepreneurial skills. And they were also developed at a really early time in life and in conjunction maybe with a little bit of your Penn State history.
Yeah. I went to Penn State in 1968. You read a book called Outliers. It says that timing and luck play a big role in your life. I have a saying that, there's 1,000 plumbers someplace in the world that could have been me. They just didn't have the luck and good fortune that I had. And
I'm going to add ingenuity, creativity, drive as well.
But I believe there's some plumbers that have all that as well, but they just didn't have the luck and the timing. I do believe, and I see a lot of people very successful, and they believe it's because of their genius and work ethic, and all those things are true, I'm sure. But you also have to have timing and luck. I think it's very important to reach certain milestones. I happened to go to Penn State when they oversold the campus by 6,800 students.
Wow.
Like today, they accept a lot more people every year. That one year, it happened. I said 6,800, I apologize. So it's 1,800 students over.
It's still a lot.
So 6,000 students were accepted, but they only wanted to have 4,800, et cetera. So there were kids sleeping out on Old Main Lawn. And the president went on TV and asked local residents to take people in. And then over time, as people dropped out, transferred, it worked itself out. But that gave me my very first business idea. And like most schools then, we were not on a semester, but a quarter system. But what happened back in the 60s and 70s, guys and girls go to school, guys meet girls. Girl ends up getting pregnant and they get married over the summer. And one of the parents, they can't afford a 2-bedroom apartment in a major university. So one or both of the parents help the newlyweds by buying a mobile home, which you can live in for a lot less money. So I did my initial due diligence and found out that everybody who's graduating in the spring of their senior year, going to work for IBM or Wilmar Supply or NFI, they're all selling, and there's 60, 70, 80 mobile homes for sale in the spring of the year. And I would wait for the last 2 weeks of the semester and go in and try to buy them at 20, 25 cents on a dollar. And then I put athletes in them over the summer just to cover my costs, the bottled gas, the electric, the land rent. And that all totaled about $60, $70 a month. And the athletes would pay me that. They lived there because a lot of athletes, not on scholarship in the summer, stayed up to work out and get better. And then in the fall, when a lot of these newlyweds were coming on campus, I took the worst mobile homes and sold them to them. And then the better ones I kept and rented. And my partner was Rich Lorenzo, who was the assistant wrestling coach. He did the maintenance. I rented them, collected the rent, and we did that for 5 years. And when I graduated and took a job with IBM, I sold that business. It was 39 mobile homes accumulated during my 5 years at Penn State, and bought my first pieces of real estate, the largest being a 32-unit apartment building.
And the rest of us were drinking beer while you were doing all that. While
And I wrestled.
a food services manager or major also.
Hotel management and food service, only because I couldn't pass an accounting class, statistics.
That's really hard to believe, but I get it.
But that's my initial story.
And it's
So talk about, then you go a sales rep for IBM, and then how that just pivoted to Safeguard Scientific. And, back when I was a young buck, starting Wilmar, that's Safeguard Scientific. I mean, you're talking about a gold standard investment
and along
business.
with that, though, Bill, and I might be wrong about these figures, but you were something like number one out of 4,400 salespeople for IBM nationwide, 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
So you clearly you had this drive to succeed at everything you did, and that paved the way then to your transition to do your own businesses.
IBM had a 1-year training program, the reason I took the job. And you would go like 4 weeks to Endicott, New York, and then 4 weeks back in the office, then 5 weeks, just over a year's period.
And IBM was so big back then. It was the only name in all that stuff.
And, I was sitting next to graduates from all the Ivies. But the difference in the training was more practical use. Academically, these guys and gals were light years ahead of me. But a lot of it was, they would train you to do, real-time selling and, hit you with obstacles and how you responded to the obstacles. And, the mental preparation I gained through wrestling and other things I'd done really helped me. And I graduated number one in my training class from IBM. And then I went on and became what's called the Rookie of the Year in the region. There were 4 regions, so it's out of about 1,500 or 1,200 salesmen. And then my first full year, I was the president of the 100% Club, 4,700 salesmen, and then the first and only one ever to do it twice. And then I was recruited away to run a sales organization for an ITT company. But that was community in Arizona and back. I had young kids, so after a couple of years, I left that and came back and went to work for 2 companies before I found Pete Musser from Safeguard Scientifics. A guy from Aronimink, an attorney who I knew. I sat on a board of an emerging company, and he was on the board. He was the lawyer for the brothers that owned the company. He said, you need to meet Pete Musser. And I was like 30-something years old, and I had never heard of him. And I went to Aronimink, and we had lunch, and he hired me that day. And that's how I started. I spent 9 years there and walked into his office one day and said, Pete, I want to leave with your blessing. I want to go start a private equity and real estate fund. I'll never compete against you. And we remained best friends. I give more credit to him helping my career than any one individual. And I stayed close to him until he died at 92.
So let's move into investing, because I think that word investor next to Ira Lubert is really what is appropriate. You consider yourself a contrarian investor. One of the things that you've taught me was protecting your downside. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite stories is when we first started talking about deals together, we once a month or once every couple of months, we'd have breakfast at the park in Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia. And I had just started lending one, or it was only about a year in. And you said, I want to invest. And I said, I'm really not taking on any investors. And then it dawned on me in a second, this is a guy that if you're in a business, it's not always going to be up. There's going to be some downs. And this is a guy you want in your foxhole when shit goes wrong. And I said, you know what? Having Ira as an investor in Lending One is, as much as you taught me along the way, it was like an insurance policy, right? Good thing was, things went pretty smooth. But there were times that you walked me in off the ledge. And this is what's called a value-added investor. To talk about the type of deals you look at and what gets you excited about a deal and how you think about protecting your downside without taking a pound of flesh out of the seller or sponsor.
I think you got to just take a step back from that a little bit and really define, I am a contrarian. So I am generally selling when everyone's buying, and I'm generally buying when everyone's selling. I think that's important. And I develop a sales strategy that differentiates myself from a lot of other people. Example, most private equity firms and most entrepreneurs have a need to control. So they need to own 51% or more. I had a very successful private equity firm called LLR Partners. I've recently retired from there after 28 years. But they took in money. Every now and then they'd buy a minority piece, but the vast majority of everything they bought would be a majority piece. Now, why is that? Well, they take in investors' money from all over the world, and that fund has to be up in 10 years, and they need to control their destiny, right? So I use that as an advantage. I'll give an example of my sales pitch. To this day, I have this pitch. I've been doing it for 40 years. So I walk in to see Bill Green, who's looking for investors, and I say, geez, Bill, I just saw Joe Blow walk out your door. And I know Joe. He's a unbelievably brilliant 28-year-old MBA from Wharton. That's where I first met him. And he's now kind of emerging as the head guy for Blackstone, just hypothetically. Let me guess, he wants to buy a majority of your company. And I say, Bill, why would you ever want to sell majority of your company? You're 57 years old. You've done this for 30 years. You're going to let a 27-year-old MBA tell you how to run your company? I want to invest in your company, Bill, but I want a meaningful but minority piece to your business. I define that as 20 to 40%. You pick. Whatever it is, you pick it, I'll take it. But Bill, I can't pay you the same value he's paying you because he's buying a majority premium. I have to get a minority discount because you're going to have control. By the way, you make every decision. There's just 3 things you can't do. Can't hire your wife or daughter without my permission. Can't give yourself a raise, and can't take on major debt. By the way, you want to sell the company tomorrow after I invest? That's your decision. As long as you tag me along. I go, what you sell, I sell at the same values. That's it. But Bill, let me say this. If you keep 70% and I get 30, in 7 years, when you're 64 years old and you really want to go on the beach or play golf, I represent to you, you'll end up making more money than if you had sold 70% to Joe Blow today. That's the pitch. Doesn't resonate with everybody, but it resonates with enough people that I get separated from the group. And that's how I can.
Well,
I think that, the point is, you're with all the venture capital and private equity experience, you're really more a holding company. You're very patient capital.
Yes.
While we all want our money back quick, there's no reason to push the envelope, right? Yeah. And you have to.
And that's the other thing I would say. Most of the people, including the people like Sid you had here recently, they start a family office from the proceeds of an amazing, successful company. You're an example of that. I've watched 10, 12 of your podcasts, 99% of them. My family office was started from investments, only investments. I didn't have an operating business like you had at Wilmar or Lending One. I was an investor in businesses like that. So my whole career has been a career of investing and investing in a minority position. by design. Not many people, like everybody says, my business is unique. That's not true. The vast majority of businesses all operate the same way. But my business is unique. I'm not in any way representing that's better or worse. I really don't know, to be honest with you. It's better for me because I'm not taking on the responsibility of operating any of those businesses. I only own one company 100%. Everything else, I'm a minority investor. Some I own half. And it's over 200 investments currently. So you can't operate those. So here's the difference. If I'm investing in Bill's business, he has all the people responsibility. He's managing, quote unquote, the people in addition to the business. I don't have the people issues.
So, but for our viewers and listeners, I really want to take a deeper dive into this because this is the genius, okay, of Ira Lubert. Ira will buy 20 to 30% of minority stake, but back to the protecting your downside. While from an economic perspective, the seller will still have majority, but trust me, those documents, he will have protected his downside. He will have implied control, because that entrepreneur is not going to be able to do a lot because Ira's got hooks in it, but not to be a jerk or to be a control monger, but it's the right thing to do as an investor that's giving control to somebody else. So we started Monkey Homes together. We're 50-50 partners. I'm the managing partner. There's not a week that goes by that we're not on the phone strategizing on, and it necessarily kind of still up in the air at the end, how this thing is going to work out at the end of the day, is strategist. Don't ask them to go, that's not true. You did have some work boots on. We did go down to Delaware and watch our project get built, and you're the first one to step in the mud. It's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, that's a 50-50 deal. It's real estate, but you have the ability to sell at any time you want in those documents. So I really would push back a little bit and say there really aren't a lot of hooks. And I mean that sincerely. I want the entrepreneur, through their success comes my success. And that's what I want. I really want to help mentor these people do better. I learn a lot from them too, by the way. But it's, what I learned over the years is the following. When one of my partners goes to a cocktail party, and someone says, what do you do for a living? The last thing they want to say is, I work for Ira Lubert. On a good day,
that's true.
They might say, Ira Lubert's an investor in my company, but they all want to say, I founded the ABC company. And by the way, Ira Lubert's one of my investors, or it ends with, I founded the ABC company. I learned that early. But so through everybody's successes comes my success. Even in my funds, I was a minority owner of the funds I helped co-found by design. Why? Because I was able to recruit world-class people. And when they went to the cocktail party, they were a co-founder of Lubert Adler, LLR, LEM, all the different funds I had. And it was their careers. And we never lost anybody because it was a career.
And in the funds, Ira, your role was obviously investment committee, but your main thing was raising money, and you raised billions and billions. You ever keep score of how many billion?
17, 18 billion.
17, 18 billion. So we're talking about, this is heavyweight, right? Heavyweight wrestler, heavyweight fundraiser.
But even that, I'll take 2 minutes and tell a story. When I approach an opportunity, I really believe you have to have differentiation. So even for raising the money, think about this. In 1997, I left Safeguard and I started a real estate fund. I didn't want to compete with Safeguard. I loved real estate. It was my first love. And I was introduced to Dean Adler. And I took Dean out of a company called CMS, and I went to raise the money. Didn't know a lot about raising money for a fund in 1997. So I gave it a lot of thought. And I came up with this idea. And I formed a holding company called Independence Capital Partners. And the concept with Independence Capital Partners was we were going to be able to have a back office integrated for Lubert Adler and then follow-on funds to use. So I went to state pension funds and city pension funds and college endowments, not many family offices back then. And I made up this pitch and I said, you know, Joe Blow from the state teachers pension fund of Pennsylvania, you're going to look at 20 new funds this quarter and pick one or two. And by the way, I think some will be better than me, but we'll be as good as most. But I'm going to tell you why I believe you should pick me. I said, when you invest money with two of us in a fund, what you're really saying is, I want you people to do 5 things. I want you to go out and source a transaction. I want you to negotiate it and get it closed. I want you to enhance its value. And I want you to monetize it at the appropriate time, sell the company, sell the investment. And that's what at the end of the day, that's really what you're paying us fees and promotes to do. And everybody would nod and go like that. And they'd all represent that they're really good at that. And I'd say, you know, you take Dean Adler and Ira Lubert, we're really good at doing those things. But one of us, if it was a normal fund, one of us would have to spend 30 to 40% of our time doing the things like investor relations, accounting, tax, oversight of legal, finance, et cetera, et cetera. That's called the back office. Everybody's required to do it. And one of those 2 or 3 partners that you're picking does it. And by the way, they hate doing it. And as a result, they don't do it great. My concept is, I have a co-op. I have 4 or 5 funds. Everybody pays into this co-op. Ira Lubert's never made a nickel off of it. And what happens is I hire the best CFO, the best HR person, the best compliance. And everybody divvies up what it costs. And Ira is out doing what you're giving me money to do. Now, by the way, that really resonated with a lot of institutions because it sounded good. And guess what? They heard 18 similar pitches, but they never heard that pitch. So we were able to raise a lot of money very quickly. And what we found into the 3rd fund of each of these funds is when they got so big, you would then have to have some of these people in your own fund in-house. That's what we did.
Ira, looking back at your amazing career, talk about what one investment, whether it's through a fund or through your family office, that you say was your favorite, a hit, and which one you'd rather forget about. There's been hundreds.
Yeah. I guess I'd say my favorite investment would be the Valley Forge Casino. Again, somebody came to my office, a lawyer gave me the idea to apply for the license.
And what year was this?
2014. I applied. I was granted this license on and then I got sued by another local casino. That took 2 years. That same casino had inserted, when this casino designation called a Category 3, they slipped in that you had to pay a guest fee to attend the casino because they didn't want competition. The established ones that had paid $50 million for a license. This casino only paid $5 million. So that got slipped in. And then even after that was in, and frankly, I didn't realize the significance of that, they sued me. They said I shouldn't have been granted a license. And after it went to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and we won the case. And then we built the casino. And I was told for years, we were tied up for 3 years, I was told, when you cut that ribbon, 1 million people are going to go. It was in King of Prussia. It was an amazing location, less than a quarter mile from the Turnpike and Route 76. It was Main on Main. And sure enough, by design, we cut that ribbon on my birthday at 12:01 midnight. Cut it, and then 12:01 we opened. And 1 million people showed up. I mean, it was lines out the door. And then a week later, I found out a very interesting lesson. Those 1 million people went back to their regular casinos where they had loyalty points and favorite cocktail waitresses and dealers. Mm-hmm. And then in addition, I was the only one charging you $10 to get in. So a lot of people wouldn't do that. So I took 4 years to have to get the law changed. Took me 4 years to do that, working in Harrisburg. And then I had to hire and fire 3 different CEOs. And I had to, first of my major investments, I had to go in and run myself. And then at the appropriate time, I was able to sell that to a New York Stock Exchange gaming business did very, very well. So when you look back to all the attributes of that investment, I'm very proud. I had a lot of investors in that, and they did great. And I really feel good that I stayed by them. Probably the worst investment is a data center investment in Pennsylvania in Fairless Hills. I backed an attorney who represented himself as a CEO, and I did a terrible job in due diligence. I fell in love with the idea and the person that was going to run it. And I started to believe my own press clippings. So I took, in hindsight, I took shortcuts, and we lost 90% of our money. That really disappointed me. I let my investors down, and I learned a lesson from that. And to this day, I tell all my people in my family office, we don't go out I never attend success dinners. And a lot of people tell you buy a company, the bankers take you to a dinner. I've never attended one of those. Most people, when you sell your companies, you go to a dinner. I have gone to some of those, but I don't go anymore. Because I want to learn more from the failures. And we focus so much attention on the ones we lose than the ones we get.
Well, I know that you speak a lot of places, and you spoke to the graduates at Penn State, maybe even the business school. And I think at the end of your comments, you said, now go out there and dare to fail.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're sort of echoing. Talk about that philosophy and how you try to instill that in a young person, especially a young entrepreneur.
Yeah. So, I did speak at the commencement exercise, and my title was You Will Fail. And I think you learn so much more from the failures. I really do. And not that I look forward to more failures, but, you can learn so much from it. And I want to make sure these graduates knew that it's not a crime or an embarrassment to fail. But when you do fail, really look in the mirror and really do a self-assessment on why that is. I think it's very important. And again, going all the way back to IBM, I did a self-assessment. You got to be blatantly honest. And for me, I realized what my strengths were and what my weaknesses were. And unlike what people say, every January people go make a New Year's resolution, I'm going to lose 20 pounds or I'm going to be a better athlete or whatever it is. And the vast majority of them, that doesn't come out to happen over time. They just forget about it. Because I found that most people's basic personalities do not change. We are who we are. And by the way, I'm not a great people person, so I'm not a great manager. I have so much respect for people like Bill. I really do, that can run a business. And I heard Sid's comments about coaching and things like that. I mean, it's so hard to run a business like these guys do. It's frankly a lot easier to do what I do. And I couldn't run a business. I really couldn't. I have very little patience. I have a work ethic that I would probably feel bad if I felt someone wasn't working like I was. I have a very dysfunctional life. I don't play golf. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy my family, but it's very limited. So as a result of that, doing that assessment of my strengths and weaknesses, again, differentiation, I put together a strategy on what would work well playing to my strengths and what could I avoid. So I say this to people, when you look at things that I have investments in, including through Lubert Adler, Albertsons supermarkets, we indirectly employ over 200,000 people. But for the last 40 some years, I've only ever had 2 people report to me. 2 people. The guy that runs my family office and all the people in the family office, he knows Michael pretty well, but he reports to Rob. I mean, even the deal guys don't report to me. And my executive assistant, those 2 people. So passing off the people responsibility to people that do it much better than I'll ever do it, like Bill, was a way for me to make 200 investments because I don't have to deal with the obstacles and the personal problems.
And the interesting thing is, as much as Ira pushes to his partners, and we'll talk about Ira's life, you all know that we've filmed a bunch of episodes of Uncorked, and we drink some really great wine. So one of the reasons why Ira's unique, he never drinks. So for 12, 13 years, I've been trying to get Ira to drink wine with me, and we go out with our wives and have a great dinner, and Ira drinks. Well, we only have Diet Coke or Coke in these cool little bottles at Saddlehill, but Ira brought his own Pepsi. He prefers that he took the Pepsi challenge, and they won. And Ira, I try to get you to drink some of my beautiful wines here, and the answer, you are a man of principle. You do not drink, and he's never drank, and it just kind of blows my mind, but maybe that's why he was able to do hundreds of investments, because he's pretty clear-minded, not like me first thing in the morning when I...
Well, it had anything to do with that.
You said you were just...
That's actually really interesting.
Pretty functional.
Super functional. And your hobbies, but what I've noticed is your hobbies do revolve sometimes around your businesses and your business network and your friends. And I've certainly been to a number of your parties, and we have so many mutual friends. But sports, I mean, you're an avid Eagles fan. You're an avid Penn State fan of any type, and probably there's not a sport I could bring up that you don't get it. So, you're just vectoring your life. Bottom line is, you don't play golf.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
You tried to teach me Texan Hold'em, right? But I could, if you lose, we wouldn't take a shot, right?
I want to take you back to Penn State for a couple of things. I know, and you light up with the whole mention, because there's two different areas. I'm going to come back to wrestling secondary. We had another guest who's a huge Penn State guy in Adam Talaferro.
Oh, sure.
And Adam is one of my favorite people. I've been fortunate to know him most of his life and just couldn't be prouder, nor could I find somebody who's more inspiring and uplifting. And obviously you know him well. I just want you to know that Adam points to you as someone who made a huge difference in his recovery, that you sort of headed up the fundraising for him when he really needed the help. And he is so forever grateful. And those are things no one ever knows about you. And there's so much more philanthropy that you've done. But I just want you to know how appreciative Adam is and how much difference that made in that young man's life.
Well, Adam's a unique guy. He was the first true freshman ever to start at Penn State football. And I happened to be at Ohio State watching him when he got hurt in the fourth quarter. So I didn't know him then, and I met him later. Just a great guy. So
yeah. Hey, Ira, you're mid-70s. You work harder than most folks I know in their 40s. What's next?
I recently retired from all of my funds I've had a family office for 16 years, but I've never worked at it. So again, these guys I'd meet them once a week for a meeting, and we'd make a lot less investments, but we'd make investments. Now, for the last year, I'm full-time in my family office, and we're going to continue to make investments, but it's really more for philanthropic endeavors. So I'm now organizing everything in the family office. Everything I have other than what's already gone to my kids and my wife will go to charity. Everything. It's all set up. It'll go the day after I die. My goal is the last check I write bounces, and there's no estate tax or anything like that.
So the plan is to spend your money or donate it?
Donate it.
And Ira, just one other Penn State thing, and this might take a few minutes. This isn't going to be rushed. Is where the wrestling program is now, the program that you participate in as a collegiate, as a collegiate athlete. And by the way, although he somewhat downplayed his own success, I think you were like 18-3-3 as a collegiate heavyweight wrestler, which is quite an accomplishment at that level. But I know that you have been spearheading a program that is now the number one in the country, which is crazy because it never was thought of that way. And it's so far and away number one. And you've got a coach, because we talk about coaching a lot in the Influence House. You have a coach that might be as good as any coach in the world at what he does. So talk a little about Penn State, what it means to you and what you've done with that program.
So it really means a lot to me. I mean, that's my golf game, is Penn State wrestling. And I've given it a lot of my time and a lot of my money. But all the credit goes to Cale Sanderson and his coaching team. They're all the same since day one, the major coaches. He's an amazing human being.
But you had a lot to do with getting him there.
I helped recruit him. There was a committee of 5. We weren't in unanimous consent about hiring him. I pushed really hard for him. I felt Penn State, like a lot of other schools, coach would retire or resign, and they would hire another coach from the same school. Penn State was the same out there. If you look at every Penn State coach, all but 1 or 2 came from Penn State. And I really felt strongly that, and Penn State would always finish around, 5th, 8th, 3rd, but wouldn't win it. And I really felt strongly that we needed to change the culture. And I went to the athletic director and the president then, and I told him that I'd like to be on the committee. And there were 5 of us. One happened to be the guy that beat me out, Dave Joyner. And they interviewed about 9 people. 4 or 5 were Penn State alumni, wrestlers. And then we flew out to Ames, Iowa, and we met Cale in a Holiday Inn room.
At that point, coaching at Iowa State, where he had produced this undefeated 4-year career of 4 national championships as well as an Olympic gold medal.
Yeah, he was in his 20s, and then he became the head coach. And he was the only college coach that year that qualified all 10 wrestlers for the nationals. He didn't win the tournament, but everyone went. Nobody else had that. But we sat, talked to him for hours, and he convinced me. I looked into his eyes, and I asked him why he thinks Penn State could excel, and he had great observations about it. He said Penn State, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, New York is hotbeds of wrestling. 2, Penn State has tremendous academic reputation. 3, he says it needs leadership. And 4, he says Penn State has an amazing potential fan base that I can wake up because people like you were wrestlers, but a lot of people in the community loved watching it in high school and grammar school. Those were his answers. And he said, I think I can bring the leadership. And I fought hard with the AD and the president to hire him. And, when all social media people said I wrote a check for $1 million to get him, not a penny. He came for a little bit more raise, but money has really very little meaning to him. And the second year he was there, he won his first national championship, which shocked the hell out of me. I thought it would take him 4 or 5 years, but it didn't.
And he kept winning.
He's won 12 out of the last 14. He's regarded now as the best college coach in any sport in the history of college coaching.
Wow.
That's chilling. And with the John Woodens, and even in the same sport with the Dan Gable histories and things like that.
I mean, and I would suggest he'll win for the next 5 years every year. I mean, last year, for the first time in history, he had one other team in history had all 10 wrestlers become All-Americans. He had it last year, but in addition, he broke the all-time scoring record for the most points in the tournament, held here in Philadelphia last year.
2 years in a row he did it. He did it in 24 and then
he broke his own record last year with more points, but he added last year 10 10 All-Americans.
Unreal.
One team, Minnesota, had 10 All-Americans, but didn't have a champ, and they won the tournament, but didn't beat the point record. So, and he has a young team.
And you've had 40 plus national champions individually as well during his time period. Just incredible.
Yeah, it really is.
And both of you, Bill, in an earlier podcast, you had mentioned how you always looked for someone who would play team sports and really excel at team sports as a great guy to hire. You play both team sports and individual sports. I'd really love to hear both your thoughts, but especially the differences and what it teaches you, because wrestling really is incredible. It's a team sport made up of individuals, and it's so much discipline and dedication and hard work, and most of it's unrewarded until they raise your arm.
Yeah, and I've hired both over the years, team sport people, but individual. But I have found an individual sport. I'm not saying it's better. It's just what I look for. You can't hide. In other words, if you're playing a team sport, you can have a lot of success and represent that on a resume or in a conversation. But who knows what your contributions were? When you're wrestling, and I'm sure there are other individual sports, but if you're wrestling out in front of 18,000 people or 8,000 people, and it comes, for me, twice it came down to having to win the match. But in the other way, you're just out there and you can't hide. And it really creates some real attributes, I think. I think being really mentally tough is important in whatever you do in life. Focus, discipline, things you talk about, but it's things that wrestlers live with every day of their lives. Talent, you have to have talent, but you also have conditioning, mental toughness, physical toughness, all those attributes. And you transition that into your later life, whatever you're doing, if it's business or teaching or whatever you want to do, it really gives you a good foundation, in my opinion, to succeed.
Well, yeah. So I do say I like people that succeed in team business, team sports, but for business, but the mental toughness it takes to succeed in a sport and not giving up or throwing in the towel, literally, right, is just so impactful, whether it's a team sport or an individual sport. Yeah. You take some of these great athletes that are, in the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning while they're going to school and doing all that stuff. So, yeah, Ira, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. It has been untraditional that we weren't able to drink wine with you, but maybe we can grab some lunch now and we'll sneak something into your.
I feel bad. Should you guys have a
Temple
glass of wine at the end?
Listen, first of all, again, I don't need to drink anymore. Hey, what you say? Dysfunctional is how you describe yourself without alcohol. So we'll all be more functional this way.
But thank you, Ira.
Thank you.
It's been great. So the traditional toasting of the wine glass is now toasting of the Coke and the Diet Pepsi. Thank you very much, my friend.
To Penn State also. Looking forward to a great football season coming up. James Franklin's done a great job in that program. And hopefully someday you get a national championship in football again.
I'm hoping this year.
Lots of prosperous investments.
So on behalf of Bill Green, I'm Jerrold Colton, thanking Ira Lubert for joining us. We'll talk to you again next time on Uncorked.